Lifestyle Podcast. Use the power of discovering new habits to create success in all areas of life. Body, fitness and nutrition, being, spirituality, passion and purpose, balance, marriage, kids and relationships, business, marketing, sales, leadership and systems. Transform your life by learning how habits work. And now your host, husband, father, entrepreneur, trainer, coach, and warrior, Jesse Mule.
And welcome back to the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast. I am your host, Jesse Mule, and today I have a very special guest, Mr. Dwayne Clark of Aegis Living. This is a housing company all up and down the West Coast with 40 locations. This man is a film company producer. He has a book company. He has a play that's actually traveling the world. He's produced 7 movies and has a variety of foundations and several things. Man, you have a laundry list of things that you're doing and have done in your life. You're also married and you have 2 kids and 9 grandchildren. So I want to welcome you to the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast.
Thanks, Jesse. I'm honored to be here, man.
Yeah, man. I don't think I've had an intro like that ever on this show. So that's a pretty amazing list of things that you're doing and currently done. And one of the cool things is you are actually from, or went to college in my hometown, Spokane, Washington.
Yeah.
And I always can tell people who go to Gonzaga or are from Spokane because they say Gonzaga instead of Gonzaga.
Yeah, exactly. All the East Coasters.
Yeah. So why don't you give me a little bit about your story, man?
Sure. I was reading your bio, and we have a lot of similarities. I grew up, in a kind of a single family, not a great dad, kind of took off when I was young. So I was about 7. So my siblings were much older than I. We were 4 kids in our family. Closest sibling to me was almost 8 years older than me. And so it was my mom and I, essentially, by the time I was 9 or 10 growing up, they all took off out of the house. So grew up super poor, a few times, didn't have enough food to eat, so it really super in-depth poverty, I would say. Kind of got in trouble as a kid. I was living in Lewiston, Idaho, and my 2 favorite things in the world were racing cars and girls. Sometimes those interchanged in terms of priorities. But, when I was 15 or 16 years old, that's all I was into. So I drag race on the weekends, make a lot of money, and said, man, making this is in the 70s, mid 70s. I'm making $1,000 a week. Why do I need to go to school? This is stupid, Got in some trouble, like to get into fights. And I decided I was going to skip school. So my sophomore year, I think I missed all but 1 class, my mythology class, because I was in love with my mythology teacher, who was beautiful. So I would go to that class, but everything else I'd ditch. And got in a fight one time at a football game. I played sports, I played football and so on, but I went to a girls' football game, powder puff football game, and I was being just a little snot. I was egging the girls. I had like 20 eggs, and I was throwing eggs on the field and trying to hit these girls. And one of the girls' boyfriends came down, and he was a guy I played football with, and was really, hacked off at me and started to get mad. And we got in a fight, and I disposed of him really quickly and started throwing eggs again. And then all of a sudden, this guy who played our left tackle came, and his girlfriend got hit, tapped me on the back shoulder. He was the all-state Golden Glove boxer. He was about 6'6", 280 pounds. I'm like, well, this is going to be interesting. So that my only chance is I'm going to have to hit him first. And that's the last thing I remember. He toasted me. So, and the damnedest thing about it is, I had broken ribs, broken nose, and no parents would help me because they were so mad at me. They were just so pissed that you deserve everything you just got, you little, SOB. So I lived about 3 blocks from the stadium. So I crawled home, told my mom, I haven't gone to school this year. And that was a life-defining moment for me. And she said, we're going to put you in a private school. We didn't have money to do that, so we went to the church, and they paid for a scholarship for me to go. And I moved to Walla Walla, which is about 100 miles away, and that changed my life. Ended up playing sports, was class president, was senior class representative, got a scholarship to go to college, and that put me on a great path.
Yeah, you went to Gonzaga, which I'm sure was a difficult place to get into back then.
Yeah, yeah. My grade point went from in Lewiston, it was a 0.73 to a 3.8 when I went to the private school. So it wasn't that I was dumb, and I think that's the thing that I always want to tell people. Sometimes it's just about how you apply yourself in life.
Sure.
Sometimes we don't just reach down deep enough inside to pull out the skills that we really have.
And I think a lot about school even now with my kids is like they're learning, a system. They're not necessarily learning something that's going to get them to grow to the next level. And I think back to even me, like I went to junior college here in California, actually about 30 minutes north of Santa Barbara, at a place called Hancock College. And I played football there for a year, but I barely went to college.
Right.
Even then, I went enough just to be able to play football. But one of the things that I realized was I didn't like college because I didn't feel like it was training me for anything that I really wanted to do. And I think I look back now and I'm like, man, if I had $100,000 or even $50,000 to just put on myself at 18, 19 years old to just work on the things that I wanted to do, that it would be completely different. But I wouldn't take that back from life experience. But I can tell you that school was very frustrating, because it was like I had a hard time paying attention unless I really liked the subject. And then when I liked the subject, it was like I got an A in that class, and the other stuff I didn't like, I didn't get a very good grade in that class.
Yeah. I think I have the same frustration. I think school does a variety of things. I think one of the things that college and undergraduate does is teach you, can you withstand the discipline of something that you may not like? So some of it, people say it's just a piece of paper. It is kind of just a piece of paper. If you get a degree in history, it's not like you're going to go get the most phenomenal job in the world, but it shows a discipline, a fortitude that you had that said, hey, I did this for 4 years and I checked all the boxes. Now, there's lots of controversy in America today about whether that is an indication of whether you're going to be a good entrepreneur, a good person, a good businessman, a good father. And I think one of the things that's happening in our country is there's coming up with all kinds of alternative learning styles. And, we all learn differently. So that's a big part of it. And I wish that, when I was going through my high school years, my first high school part, that, someone had tapped into that and said that. And that's why I mentor a lot of kids, to try to explain that to them. And, you're not going to be able to take all the fun classes you like. Part of this is an experiment in fortitude.
Yeah. And, for me, like, unfortunately, football, weightlifting, boxing, and whatever other sport I was playing wasn't, how you got good grades. And I excelled at those.
Right.
I actually started selling steroids at like 16 and a half.
Yeah.
Up until I was about 24, just so I could support myself playing sports and, make sure that I was the best athlete. I was better than anybody else. And that was where I got a lot of attention, from my parents and other people. And so I really excelled at that. And little did I know that would, put me on a path to a personal training career, where, eventually I realized, hey, being a professional bodybuilder is probably not the best career choice if I want to live past 30, 40 years old.
Right.
And, after being in jail a few times, I kind of realized that, hey, there's more to life than, working out. There's more to life than, being the biggest, strongest guy. And, and then just over the years, realizing that, hey, now I can actually talk to people and tell them, listen, like, just because someone's in shape on the outside doesn't mean they're still in pain and they're still hurting on the inside. And I think there's a misconception that only people overweight feel that way, when, you know, a lot of people that I know is like, even both sides, the more in shape someone is, generally the more that they've focused on the outside instead of what's happening on the inside.
No, I think it's very true. I think, you know, there's pain on both sides. Doesn't really, the physique itself is a little bit irrelevant. It's the fact that you're trying to mask something else.
Right.
And I have a buddy of mine that I'm coaching right now that just turned 70 years old. And he came, I hadn't seen him for about 2 months. Normally we see each other every week, but our schedules got busy. And so he came over to the house the 1st of March, and he had just ballooned up, and he weighed 293. And he's a tall guy. He's 6'2", so he's not short, but still 293. I looked at him, I said, dude, 70 years old and 293 should not be said in the same sentence. And so he allowed me to take him through a training that I put together and coach him every day. Just got off the phone with him here 15 minutes ago. And, you know, he's lost since March 35 pounds now. And, you know, his blood levels and everything are almost back to normal. I mean, he was a walking heart attack. And, you know, when we talk about this, he was eating for comfort. He was eating, and he was in this massive denial mode about a variety of things. And he's moved out of the city. He bought a farm. His lifestyle has totally changed.
Wow.
Less than 90 days. So.
Wow. So what do you spend the majority of your time doing today? Is it coaching people? Is it, you know, working on your businesses? Or are you kind of like out of the day-to-day business stuff and you just are more of play a CEO role?
Well, that's a great question. You know, I just turned 60 years old, so I constantly reevaluate where I'm going, what I'm doing. Is it worthy? I talk about creating the artifacts of life. Am I going to leave these artifacts on this planet when I leave here that I'm really proud of? And so that's an important aspect to me. So, you know, Aegis Living, which is my main company, has been incredibly successful. We've been voted best employer, you know, multiple times. We were the Glassdoor top 50 company. We were voted a year ago top 20 places in the nation to work for work-life balance. So that's a company that I'm very happy to own, and I founded that company. And you know, we have a few $1 billion in real estate and almost 3,000 employees, and you know, it's a great company. We just hired the president of Starbucks North America to be our president.
Oh, wow.
So he's running the company. I'm still the CEO and chairman. I'm spending probably about 60% of my time there.
Okay.
So that's a good kind of a good rhythm for me. And then I write a lot. You know, I've had a variety of books. I had a book called My Mother, My Son. That was a true story about my life and my mom growing up. My mom eventually got Alzheimer's and died in actually one of my communities. So I wrote a kind of an autobiographical book that did really well, and it's being made into a Hollywood movie. So, so we're working on that right now. So I'm spending time on that. I have this book called My 30 Summers More that's coming out in September. And I've been writing it for 5.5 years because I've taken care of 60,000 elderly. And I always wondered, what's the commonality about people living to this long and this age and so on? And so I started studying all these elderly people. I interviewed 101 and 106-year-old ladies, 2 ladies that lived with us last week. And as I was going through this, I kind of had my own health crisis because I wasn't taking care of myself. And so I thought, God, this book is more about, 40, 50, 60-year-olds than it is 80-year-olds.
Sure.
So I traveled the world and I looked at what the best practices were for living long and living well. And so that book comes out in September on Amazon, and we're just really excited because I think it's really going to change people's lives. And there's a lot of what I call micro habits in there that are simple things. And most people think, hey, it's all about diet and exercise and genetics. Well, genetics only plays 18 to 22% of a person's longevity. Diet and exercise are important. Diet's probably 4 times more important than exercise. You may disagree with me being a trainer, but really what you put down your gullet is super important. But there's a lot of things that don't deal with your traditional things. Like one of the things that Harvard has the longest study on longevity in the nation. And what they found is if you're in a happy marriage at the age of 50, you can live as long as 10 years longer than somebody who's not. So, being married is a great thing.
Sure.
Having a sense of purpose. So a variety of things. I had the opportunity to have lunch with Bill and Hillary Clinton here about 3 weeks ago. And I did this study on presidents, and presidents are living as much as 20 to 30 years longer than they should have based on the year they were born. And so you think about that, Jesse, and you think, well, God, that's the most stressful job in the world. Why aren't these guys dying early of heart attacks and so on? So I was talking to the Clintons, and they said, what it's really about is purpose. Because Bill Clinton told me he'd had very few men in his family that lived over the age of 60, and he's almost 73. And he said, you're so fulfilling to have purpose. And so purpose now scientifically is becoming one of the major things for people to live well and live long. The guys that retire at 60, 65 and go golfing or fishing all day, those guys die early. Right. So, I'm just trying to get at, and all my books, all the profits go to charity. So I'm not money motivated by them. I'm just trying to create these life artifacts for myself.
Yeah. I think, when you say that is like, when I think of diet and I think of exercise, those are like stress management tools. Like to me, what would actually have someone die early in life is actually stress, and stress of like things like living in the past.
Right. Negative stress.
Yeah. So like just stress management. Like I'm really big right now into, and I have been for a few years, heart rate variability. Which I don't know if you know what that is, but there's a lot of it coming out now. And originally I first learned about it like 12, 13 years ago, where you can actually monitor the stress level on your body from a physical standpoint, kind of like mental stress, and then also like your sleep, and just how much of an impact those actually have on your health. And then when you look at things like nutrition, and things like that, yes, it has an impact, but like to me, stress kicks everything else off.
Yeah.
And if I'm stuck in my mind, in my body, like living in a past thing that happened, and I continue to repeat that cycle, those thoughts, those feelings, those patterns, I stay stuck living there. Even you hear about athletes talking about what they used to do. Every once in a while you get around people you've known for a long time and they'll just bring up stuff that you used to do maybe in high school, college, but it's like they're stuck in this place of unreality. And, I think it's important to learn from the things that have happened in the past, but it's also important to reestablish this future purpose like you're talking about. Because when we have purpose, we tend not to hang on to the past.
Yeah. Well, even the negative events of the past. I was on a radio show here this week and somebody said, well, you've had a tough upbringing. Would you change anything? I said, absolutely not. I wouldn't change a thing, because it's more about how you process it. Right.
Right.
So, when I mentor these college athletes or even some of these pro athletes, and they'll say, my dad was in jail, or he was a heroin addict, or my mom was on crack or whatever. And I go, well, great. Well, how are you processing that? And they go, what do you mean? It was horrible, And I go, well, you can dwell on that. You can wallow in the fact that it was horrible, or you could say, you know what? I'm super lucky that I had those people because it motivated me to be something super different. I don't know if you remember Dr. Wayne Dyer, who wrote all kinds of, So Wayne was a mentor to me. And I remember one time telling him, hey, my dad was abusive, and he left my mom and I and no money. He goes, God, your dad was phenomenal. And I'm like, Wayne, you're not hearing me, dude. I mean, my dad was an asshole, and he was abusive to my mom and my sisters and everybody. He was mean to animals. He's like, yeah, what an incredible dude. And I'm like, I know there's some message here for me that I'm not picking up that you're throwing down. So help me out here. And he's like, are you a good dad? I'm like, yeah, I'm a phenomenal dad. He said, are you a good husband? I said, yeah, I'm an incredible husband. He said, okay, well, why is that? I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, your dad taught you what you didn't want to be. And so, that's just the way you process things. If you
Yeah.
look at all these negative experiences in your life or negative people, you get to learn, you get to have a choice about what you want to be. And growing up in an impoverished family where we often didn't have enough food to eat, I had a formula for rocket fuel because I wanted to get away from poverty, away from abusive lifestyles, away from negative people. So I ran as fast and as hard as I could to get away from that, man. But not all people see this rocket fuel. Some people just see it as, hey, I'm in the quagmire of life and it's a poor me syndrome.
Yeah.
You're going to live with that quagmire of life until you flip that paradigm.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with tons of people. It's like, hey, I am the way I am because of this happened to me. And, this is where I feel like 80 to 85% of people live today is like, hey, I am the way I am because of this. And instead of looking at it as like, even I grew up, my dad was an alcoholic, but I will say for the most part, he always made it a point to come to my sports, to be around those things and to be involved. Just some of the ways that he wasn't, what I expected a father to be. But as I've gotten older, I've learned that, man, my dad taught me that I didn't want to drink, in front of I didn't want to be an alcoholic. My dad taught me how to work through my anger eventually, because that was what I seen. And so I got an opportunity to see my dad in a different light when I eventually got to a place where I was like, my dad actually taught me quite a bit.
Yeah.
And if I really look at the things he taught me how to work hard. He taught me, all these things about discipline, getting up early, always kind of like working on something. And then he also taught me these other things. It was the choice and the lens that I had to view it and say, well, my dad did the best he could with the tools that he had. And unfortunately, back 20, 30 years ago, there wasn't a lot of tools handed out.
Right. Yeah. There's an expression I like to use. Your parents did the best job they could with the way they had it figured out.
Yeah.
So it may not have been the way you have figured it out, but they did the best job they could with the way they had it figured out. And it may be the way they figured out was really, messed up, but it's the way they thought about it. The other thing that I do that I'm sure you probably try to think about is when you're trying to remove somebody from these negative mindsets, these negative environments, this negative history, you have to look at what I call the reinforcers. And what I mean by that, I just gave you a great example. I was mentoring this one kid who's in college, and he's talking about, hey, I lived in the ghetto, and everybody sold crack, and and so I go, do you ever watch TV? And he goes, yeah, I watch TV all the time. I go, cool. What's your favorite programs on TV? And he said, oh, I love that show Cheaters. I love Cops. I love Jerry Springer. I'm like, dude, those are your reinforcers. And he looked at me like, I was an alien. He's like, I don't know what you mean, D. And I go, dude, you are reinforcing how you grew up. These are all negative influencers in your life that you're putting into your brain. So you're saying, hey, this is my life. This is my environment. If you don't want to be those people, don't expose yourself to that kind of drama, that kind of negativity, And he looked at me like, he'd seen Jesus for the first time. He's just like, wow, are you kidding? And it dawned on him that what he was doing, it was very comforting to him because it was familiar, right? It was his hood. It was familiar to him. And so he's like, okay, if I'm going to change my life, I got to take the reinforcers out. And that applies to people in your life too. So one of the things that I coach people on, as I say, every 10 years, maybe less if you're younger, is sit down on a piece of paper and write down everybody you're friends with. If it's 50 people, 100 people, whatever. And then go by each person that is a negative, drama-sucking vampire or person that doesn't bring anything to your life, and put a check mark by it. And then say, these are the people that I'm not going to have relationships with. It may even be a family member. Right. Now, that sounds really cold and callous, and people say, Dwayne, how could you do that? it's about your life, man. It's about your life. And if you want to have people in it that suck the energy and the positivity and drag you down and, live a bad life, and hang out with those people. But you should be aspirational. You should want to have people that are going to lift you. And so then what I try to do is replace those with people that are going to mentor me and show me the way and give me a better lifestyle and be counter to the way I grew up. And that's the only way you change. That's the only way you develop.
Yeah, I mean, I think of myself being in an environment where I had this identity for 14 years as a trainer. And when I went to begin changing that, even in my own business, I went from kind of like being the trainer that everybody looked to stepping back out and being more of a CEO. As I did that and I began coaching, more people and not so many people in my gym, but just kind of coaching people in a different space, people wanted to bring me back to being a trainer. Hey, will you train me? Will you do these things? And I'm like, no, I won't. And they would get upset about it. And it was because I wanted to change my identity and who I was, but people wanted to keep me where they felt safe around me. And,
right.
And so I think the biggest thing is like what I heard you say is like, hey, we will go to where we feel safe and where we find comfort, even if that's drama, even if it's like trauma or some type of event. Sometimes that stuff makes us feel safe and more comfortable than to actually disassociate from that with friends and be uncomfortable. Like this is the most uncomfortable I think I've ever been the last 10 months because like we pretty much know no one. We moved away from everything that we've known, family, community, my own business, to being in an environment where we literally maybe know 10 people when we first got here.
Yeah. Well, that's when you know you're growing.
Yeah.
I call it going to the emotional chiropractor.
Yeah.
So, you go to the chiropractor because, your back hurts and you go in there and it's like, ow, oh man, that's cracked. And then you walk out and you go, oh, it feels better. Well, we got to do this in life too. You got to go to the emotional chiropractor, and the emotional chiropractor is going to stretch you, and there's going to be some pain and everything else. But if you get through to the other side, you're going to be better off. And
right.
The problem with people who want us to remain in this domain of who we are, probably the worst perpetrators are your family because they've known you for so many years in a certain way, right? And I can remember when I became a CEO, my family's like, "Oh, Mr. La-di-da, you're the big, you're too good for us, And so it was a difficult conversation to say, "Hey, this is my evolution, and this is where I'm going." And at some point, they kind of get sick of hearing your accomplishments. Oh, you're writing a book. Oh, you're doing a movie. Oh, blah blah blah. Gag me. So you have to say, "Hey, this is my evolution. I still love you." And I'm still going to support you, but I'm not going to be that person I was when I was 15 and screwing up and missing school and that you thought was fun. I'm going to do something different because this is what I have to do to evolve as a person. And that's hard for people. As simple as that sounds, that's difficult for people to have that conversation, that courageous conversation with your family and friends to say, this is my path, man. And I think I'm going to make my family better. I'm going to be a better person, a better husband. I'm going to make the world better, but this is my path.
Yeah, and I've had to have that conversation with several people. I remember having it with someone who actually really helped me build my business in a sense. And
right.
I sat there, I remember like saying like, hey man, like, thank you for everything you've done for me, but I do not want to hang out with you anymore.
Yeah.
And
how did that go, Jesse?
It didn't go very well. I mean, he was upset, but I was like, listen, like, I don't look up to you the same as I used to. And we're just two completely different people, and I remember having this conversation and feeling guilty. But the minute I walked away, it was like all that guilt and shame went away because I think that guilt and shame of actually telling someone how we really truly feel, it's like it's mean or, we have these stories about it. But at the same time, like you said, it's my life. I'm not doing this out of a way of like being resentful. It's just, hey, here's my path. I know where I want to go, and you're not going to be part of it, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, that's the courageous conversation. I mean, and that's sometimes people are not always courageous. So as long as you're transparent and you're honest and you're not mean, you're just being, you're having a transparent conversation with them. People usually respect that. They may not like that, but they respect it. And usually what people say to me when they have those conversations is like, oh man, it's like the elephant got off my chest. I feel so good about this. It's a cleansing, right? And that's where you start to evolve. That's where you're going, hey, I'm getting rid of some of these anchors around my ankles that are dragging me down. I'm cleansing myself so I can be open to new possibilities.
Yeah. So how long have you been married?
Been married. Was married before for 15 years. I've been married almost 20 years this time.
Okay. So, what's been the biggest impact your marriage has made on you?
Well, I feel very fortunate. My wife is probably the greatest gift that I've ever had in my life. I've had all kinds of financial success and, honors and glories and so on. But she's a woman that challenges me in ways that I never thought I could be challenged. And, because I've been accomplished, I dated so many women that, were just fell in love with my accomplishments. And then I met my wife, whose name is T, and T's like, I'm really not impressed with any of that. I want to be impressed with your soul. And I think she evolved me to another level spiritually. She evolved me to another level as, a human being. I credit a lot of our philanthropy to her because she really, we have a goal to make the world better when we leave it than when we entered it. So we do a lot of that stuff together. But, I've never met a person that said, oh, I just love your wife. And I say, yeah, I'm punching above my weight class here, man, because she's phenomenal. So.
Yeah, I think the cool thing is, when we have a wife or a partner that challenges us in ways that we normally don't get challenged.
Right.
Especially, being a CEO of a company or being the one who runs the company. And then all of a sudden it's like, I step into this frame of my wife challenging me on several things. It forces me to grow. And like when our wives have a high standard, I actually look at a lot of my accomplishments from my wife because she almost held me to a higher standard, I feel like sometimes, than I held myself.
Right.
And when I stepped out of that frame, I was like, man, she actually has this higher standard of me, and I have to rise up to that. And it would force me to grow.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool that you say that because, that's one of the things that I notice even with my wife, and we're in the process of doing marriage boot camps for couples. And this is something new that we are going to be doing at the end of June here in Dana Point, California, to where we're actually going to be working with married couples and ones that have just kind of settled with the mediocrity of just being in a good marriage. And, I think sometimes we can settle in that place and stop challenging each other to grow. And that's really what, marriage is about.
Well, I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. John Gottman.
Yeah.
Okay. John's written more books on couples. I think he's had 5 New York bestsellers. The Relationship Cure, Why Marriages Fail. He does workshops where he may have 500 couples come for a weekend and so on. John was T and my private counselor before we got married.
Oh, wow.
And so he's phenomenal. And he taught us a lot about, listening to each other and really reveling in the differences that we have. My wife, I don't know if you've ever taken an Enneagram test. But Enneagrams have been around, I think, thousands of years. They're personality tests. They're really phenomenal. Really helps you with leadership and so on. And you can go online, take them for like $10, $15. But my wife, in Enneagrams are rated from 1 to 9. My wife is a 2, which is a caring, loving person. I'm an 8, which is a controlling leader, overachiever kind of guy. And so they're actually a perfect pairing. And we both have our weaknesses. A 2 is a person. The negative about 2 is they may exhaust themselves caring for everyone in the universe. They may not have enough energy to care for themselves. eights is like you're out trying to change the world so much that, you forget to take care of yourself. So, it's so important to understand who you are and how you're going to interact in these relationships. I have an expression for my friends, that are, 50 years old and 30 pounds overweight, and they want to date a supermodel. And I said, well, what are you willing to become to get what you want to have? Because the supermodel is probably not going to date you, looking like you are, acting like you are, coming to the date in sweatpants. So, what are you willing to become to get what you want to have? And so I think that serves people well in terms of relationships, and it's an important thing.
Yeah, me and my wife, we've worked together. I call it co-creation in our gym business, and we operated very well together because we kind of knew each other's strengths and knew each other's weaknesses. And when we'd cross over the line with each other, and she may try to fix stuff I'm doing, and I may try to fix some stuff she's doing, that's usually when we'd have conflict. But I can attest to what you said. Like, I would be more of the controlling, hey, I want to, keep going and keep doing this. And she would be the one trying to, in a sense, take care of everybody
right
at the gym. And so I can, relate to that quite a bit. I see that a lot. And I think it's, it's a good thing, because sometimes we need to remind ourselves of like, hey, you still have to come back to this foundation in your marriage and in life. And that's the stability where you can continue to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you have a great partnership, it just makes your success so much easier, because you're not worried about, what's my home life like and so on. I know in my previous marriage, I consumed so much energy in my previous marriage about worrying about my home life. And so that drew me away from my business, my health, my success. And, it's no coincidence that when I married T, my success just skyrocketed, because she kind of took care of all the personal things, and you're in a better mindset. You just got a better flow about, who you are and where you're going and everything else.
Yeah. So when, like, you got 40 locations in your business, how long have you had this company? Ages?
Started in 97. Yeah.
Okay. So a little over 20 years.
Yeah.
And when did you really take off in this company?
Well, we've had pretty good growth, almost every year. But I would say I bought my partner out about 10, 11 years ago.
Okay.
And, that's why I tell people, hey, take all the risk and take all the fame. Sometimes we think we need partners or whatever, but I would tell people, if you possibly can, do it all yourself. And I think in the last decade, we've just soared. And, we have our buildings are the Four Seasons of senior housing. So the last 3 years, we won the best architectural award out of hundreds of people that applied. So, if you walk into this building, you'd say, this is a Four Seasons hotel.
Oh, wow.
They're really nice. And so that, and really focusing on employee development. We put on this conference every year called EPIC, EPIC, and it stands for Empower People, Inspire Consciousness. And we have anywhere from 7 to 10 speakers a year. And these are world-class speakers. So, we've had Ted Kennedy Jr., Deepak Chopra, Ashley Judd, Susan Sarandon, Harold Belafonte, Sylvester Stallone. We've had endless people and every year there's a theme. So we do themes to try to create a different paradigm for people. I'll give you an example. So one year, I was really getting disgusted about how media would judge people. And then they would put out these stories about, well, this is this kind of person, this is, and so on. And so I did this whole EPIC conference there every January on judgment. And is the way we judge people really fair? Because we read a news story and we're like, oh, that person's a jerk or whatever. So I had all these controversial people come and speak. So we had Sonny Barger, the founder of the Hells Angels. We had Amanda Knox, the woman who allegedly murdered her roommate in Italy, was found innocent. We had Monica Lewinsky. We had Lance Armstrong. We had Macklemore. We had all these people that had these kind of controversial backgrounds. And then, people would, and I said, I just want you to hold a space to see if you think of them differently after you meet them and talk to them, and you hear their side of the story. People were like just so blown away, and they're like, "Oh my God, I'll never hold judgment out over someone." And that's an important lesson, that we judge people based on information that we don't know is factual, we don't know is true, we don't know if somebody's just trying to sell a newspaper or a headline or whatever. And that's an important asset in life, is not judging people, not
Right.
and I have a difficulty with that. I'm quick to judgment if a person dresses a certain way or looks a certain way. I'm like, they must be lazy or whatever. So I'm trying to change my personality trait about how do I judge people that I don't have all the facts on. And that was a real epiphany for people.
Yeah, and I would say I tend to judge people based off how they look.
Right.
It's like, okay, like I put them in these profiles.
Yeah.
And I've kind of learned over the years is like, hey, a lot of times, people may be overweight, they may be even in shape. They both could have similar issues. They're just choosing the way to solve the problem, the
Right.
way that it works for them. And I think that's a hard thing, especially with news the way it is now more than ever. It's like it's just based out of pure judgment and a frame that the news wants you to be in. And once you step outside of that, you can actually see the real things going on. And I've had a really hard time. I don't even think I watch the news anymore because of that.
Yeah, it's a negative pipeline right in our brain.
Yeah. So tell me, like, you have this book coming out. Can you share anything in it, or like maybe
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's it gets away from all the traditional things that we think at. And again, I don't want to undermine the fact that exercise is important, or diet's important, or genetics are important, but there's so much other things. You can control 80% of your longevity. The only thing you can't control is your genetics. So 80% of how well you live, how long you live is in your control. And so it's little things. I call them micro habits. We were talking about the kind of TV you watch. Well, if you're watching Cops at 10:30 at night and then you go to sleep, you develop this syndrome that I've termed fire brain. It's a lot of drama and you're all excited and everything. So you try to go to sleep and the cortisol, rages through your body. We don't get the deep sleep, the REM sleep that you need. And so, your cellular production goes down. You're not able to get the restful kind of sleep that you need to regenerate your body. So, one of the things I talk about is what you do right before you go to bed. What are those micro habits?
So what do you have a couple of go-to habits that you use?
Yeah. Well, I mean, not exercising within 2 hours, not, the caffeine thing, but people eat people eat chocolate at 8:00 at night. They don't think of it as caffeine. That's chocolate. Doing some kind of meditation a couple hours before you go to bed. Not exposing yourself to any blue lights, whether that's your iPad, your computer, your phone, your television, within 2 hours of going to bed. So, keeping the room cool, buying great sheets and pillows, keeping the room dark, all these things, because sleep is foundational. That beyond anything else, I would tell you, if you work out, 12 times a week and you eat the perfect diet, if you're not sleeping, you're not going to be healthy, because sleep does two things. One, you need 7 hours of sleep for you to detoxify, because what happens when you sleep is your body actually excretes all the bad cells that gives you things like cancer and diabetes and heart disease and everything else. And then you have to wash those away. The other thing is it's a factory. And when you're sleeping, it needs 7 hours to make the good cells to replace it. Once you reach the age of 30, we used to be able to party like we're rock stars until we're 30. Once you hit 30, what happens is your body uses more cells than it can make. Up until 30, it's making more cells than you can use. You're like, hey, I can survive on 3 hours sleep. Remember those days, Jesse? So, and then you hit 30, you're like, man, what happened? I can't do this anymore. Well, that's what happened. What happened is your body's producing less cells than you're consuming. And this is a depressing thought, but at 30 is when you really start to die, because your body is slowly using that reserve of cells and so on. And so, so our job is to really make the cells as healthy as possible. That comes through diet. That comes through exercise. That comes through meditation. But it also comes through little practices like in Japan for years. One of the things they've been doing is before their feet hits the ground, before they go pee, before they have their coffee or tea or whatever, the first thing that they do is drink 1 to 2 big glasses of water, room temperature. And what that does is it starts your metabolism, but it washes out all the stuff that the toxins that your body has tried to get rid of during the night. And what do most Americans do? They get up, they go pee, they go right for the coffee pot, they drink 3 cups of coffee. What does that coffee do? That coffee is dehydrant. And so it actually, makes you more dehydrated. And when you sleep at night, you'll lose anywhere from, depending on your size, 14 to 20 ounces of fluid during the night. So your body needs that fluid again to wash away those toxins that you've tried to dispel during the night. So that one simple tip that I've given people, I've heard from all over the world that people like, hey, I used to have brain fog in the morning. My brain fog's gone. Just drinking, 12 to 20 ounces of room temperature water first thing in the morning.
Is there a specific type of water?
No. You just put tap water, put it on your nightstand. I use bottled water. I use Fiji, and I just have a couple of bottles, and I just down them first thing I get up in the morning. Your brain fog will just be eliminated, and you'll actually burn fat faster because your metabolism then gets started.
Sure.
And it'll cleanse your system. So.
Yeah, so I have water that's molecular hydration. It's a company called Trucy that makes this water, and it's like a hydrogen water. They also have tabs, but this is what I have a $10,000 machine in my office that I use. That is the first thing I drink every day. And then I also have pills. So if I'm at home, I take them before I go to bed. But, from things that I've read is you're actually waking up dehydrated. So if the first thing you do is reach for caffeine, you're just dehydrating yourself even more. And so
right.
Even if you're talking about exercise and movement, your fascia is actually no longer hydrated either.
Right.
So you're actually tightening up your muscles, your fascia, and everything else in your body. Your organs are actually not functioning properly.
Right.
And that's, one of the first things that happens when you get out of bed. Also, is there anything you monitor your sleep with to know what type of sleep you're getting?
Yeah. I have an Aura and
Okay.
I have a Fitbit, and I monitor them every day. And, my goal is to get between REM and deep about 3 hours. If your REM is at least 15% and your deep is at least 15%, you're doing okay. Your deep sleep, if you can get that to 15% of your nightly, that's when it's the most restorative. And what happens as you age is deep sleep starts to diminish. So, an hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes of deep sleep, that's great. Like last night, I have a little bit of a cold, so I kept waking up coughing. My deep sleep, I think last night was 31 minutes. And I can feel it this morning, because that's about half of what I normally get.
So one of the things I've read is 40% of REM and deep compared to your overall sleep is about where you want to be.
Well, it changes as you age. If you're 35, 40% is phenomenal. As you're 50, once you hit 70 years old, I can tell you our people are getting about 20% of their overall sleep in REM and deep. So I would love to hit 40%. I think on average, I'm probably about 33 to 35.
Yeah, and I'll get a lot more deep than I do REM.
Yeah.
By far, I have a hard time getting a lot of REM sleep. I kind of play around with supplements, trying to figure out the right dose to get the right amount of sleep. Do
you meditate at all?
Yeah, so I meditate first thing in the morning, like right after my workout in the morning, and then I meditate midday. I call it the adult nap.
Right.
I use I don't meditate at night because I feel like I do more of like an embodiment practice or like breath work.
Right.
At night, because I feel like if I meditate, a lot of times I just fall asleep.
Yeah, you don't want to meditate too close to bedtime. Like if you go to bed at 10:30, don't meditate at 9. But if you meditate at 7, if you go to bed at 10:30, that's probably okay. And you're not doing any blue light before you go to sleep.
Well, I have glasses that block that out, and then I usually try not to do any blue light about 90 minutes before bed.
Yeah.
Because I think regardless, if you're on your computer, if you're on your phone, if you're watching TV, it's stimulating you regardless if you have glasses on or not.
Right.
And it's still kind of putting you in that stress mode or stimulation mode. And I still think it affects your sleep.
Yeah, well, it's the cortisol release. That's what's doing it. That's what's firing. That's why I call it fire brain, because it's really firing your brain up.
Do you have a morning routine that you are consistent with, or?
Yeah. I mean, I drink my water. I do TM, transcendental meditation. So 22 minutes in the morning. I'm not religious about doing it in the evening. I sleep great. But I meditate every day, and then probably 4 to 5 times a week I work out. Maybe weights twice a week, cardio 3 times a week, and then that's I take a lot of supplements, a lot of vitamins, and try to surround myself with good people, good thoughts, and good habits.
Do you work from home quite a bit, or do you have an office you go into, or is it you do a little bit of both?
Yeah, I do both. I'd say I'm in the office 60% of the time. I probably do 4 podcasts a week, so I do them from home. And, I'm starting my own podcast here this summer called Walk This Way. And so I'll be doing more of those kinds of things. But, my office, I love my office. It's got an award-winning design and stuff, so it's a really cool environment. So I love going in there as well. So it's just whatever the spirit moves me where to go. So
yeah, that's great. And you live a little bit outside of Seattle.
Yeah, we live in just on the east side of Seattle, and we have a home in Santa Barbara as well. We also live part-time in Italy. We're going there next week. And so we learn a lot from how to live right with the Italians. They teach us a lot about, how to live a good life.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, what's something you can leave everybody with, that you feel like would give them the most impact?
Oh, geez, that's a tough question. I think, so we haven't really talked about the medical aspects of stuff, but I tell you, one of my big kicks is to have people take their blood sugar. There's probably 5% of the nation walking around that are untreated diabetics or pre-diabetic, and they don't know it. And so, for $90, you can go down to your local drugstore and buy a blood sugar testing kit. And, you have to poke your finger. It doesn't really hurt that bad. Do it for a week and see if your blood sugar is, under 95. If you're 100 or above, you're pre-diabetic. If you're 120 or above, you're diabetic. And a lot of times people will say, I can't lose weight. And they can't lose weight because their blood sugar is unstable.
Right.
And so I'm, we have a rich history of diabetes, unfortunately, in our family. So, what I try to do is get people in touch with that. And if I can get their blood sugars down, the weight just starts falling off. But, until their body thinks that it's in crisis and they need to hold on to that weight to protect them and not starve. So, yeah, I would suggest that. And everybody's like, I had a family member who was 22. She was a yoga instructor. And she kept telling me, God, I kind of feel dizzy. And, I said, well, let's take your blood sugar. And she's like, and she was had 8 ounces of body fat on her. I mean, she ate that body fat. She was ripped up. And I take her blood sugar, and it's first thing in the morning. It's like 168. And I'm like, man, you are diabetic. She's like, no way. And sure enough, she was diabetic. So, sometimes just genetically that's imposed on us. And so you got to know these things about your body. I mean, I take my blood sugar every day. I take my blood pressure every day. I weigh every day. I meditate every day. These are the things that I do. And part of it is because if you go to the doctor, you want to tell the doctor what your baseline is. You don't want some, nurse's aide to come in and take your blood pressure and say, well, this is what it is. You want to say, no, this is my baseline. So by the time you go to the doctor, you're telling them I'm off baseline and here's what it is. And you got, I log this every day. So
plus, I think when we go to the doctor, it naturally raises just from stress of, going to the doctor and thinking about all these things.
It's the white coat syndrome. Yeah.
Yeah. And also when we go to a doctor, they have to tell us what's wrong with us. Otherwise, there's no reason for us to go to the doctor.
Yeah. Well, and the average doctor, and this is in my book, the average doctor gives you 18 minutes of his time. Yeah. So when you go in there, you want to make that the most efficient 18 minutes. And so instead of going in, the doctor goes, what's the matter? You want to go in and say, here's what's going on. This is my baseline. Here's what I think the problem is, and the doctor goes, oh, okay, well, now I can get into treatment mode instead of assessment mode. You don't want the doctor spending 15 minutes on assessment mode. You want them to be into treatment mode.
That's great, man. So you have this book coming out. Can you say the name of the book again?
Yeah, it's called 30 Summers More, and it's going to be sold on Amazon. Okay. And, if people want to get in touch with me, they can go to Dwayne, Dwayne, J, just the letter, period, Clark, C-L-A-R-K. I have my website there. And you can hit me up, ask me more questions. Otherwise, all my books are sold at Amazon. All the profits go to charity. And I hope you guys enjoy it.
Yeah, well, hey, man, I want to just thank you for being on here today and really acknowledge the impact you're making in the world and continue to make. And it looks like you have plenty of stuff coming up that you're going to make an even bigger impact. So,
well, thanks, Jesse. Same to you. Your podcast is reaching a lot of people and hopefully changing a lot of lives. So good luck with everything you're doing.
Yeah, thank you very much. If you're looking to connect further with a group of like-minded people, join myself and thousands of others in my Habit-Based Lifestyle Secrets group on Facebook. If you want to connect, maybe be one of our next case studies, leave a review. Feel free to reach out to me, Jesse at habitbasedlifestyle.com. You can also check out my website, JESSEEWELL.com. Until next episode, have a great day.